Keandre Miller makes a horrendous mistake. The Rangers don't play any defense, and the team gives up a 3-goal lead and loses 5-4 to the Stars in overtime. Here we go.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1221 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, not a good loss. This is honestly probably, I would say, right up there among the most infuriating losses that the Rangers have had all season in a campaign that's becoming chock full of them at an alarming rate here. We've got all different kinds of candidates for worst loss, worst effort, worst performance, this, that, and the other thing, worst blown lead of the season. Like the list just goes on and on and on. But as far as just infuriating, this one was really up there for me, and I'm sure it was for probably a lot of you as well. We're going to break this one down from every angle, but I do want to start with the play at the end of regulation that basically cost the Rangers this game, because for all the mistakes that the Rangers made, the fact that they gave up a 3-goal lead at home, they were still in position to win this game. I realize it's not entirely fair for me to come on here and pin this entire loss on Keandre Miller, so I'm going to do my best not to do that. But when you make a mistake like this, of this magnitude, such an unnecessary, just kind of a mental mistake, kind of a deal at the end of a game, and it costs your team this badly, while your team is really up against it and just losing games and losing games and losing games, then yeah, this is going to be under the magnifying glass, and that's certainly going to be the case on this podcast here today. So, yeah, I mean, basically, it's getting down toward the end of this game. And to set the stage, I think some recapping is in order here. So again, the Rangers take the 3-0 lead early in the game. 2 goals by Lafreniere, 1 by Trocheck. Great, awesome. They weren't perfect up to that point. That 3-0 lead probably wasn't indicative of how this game had played out to this point. The Stars were obviously creating a lot of chances. Jonathan Quick was bailing out the Rangers on several occasions, but that's where we were. The Rangers were up 3-0, and then the Stars start to come back. They eventually tie it at 3-3, but then we get the power play goal by Vincent Trocheck. Late in the third period, this was about 6 or 7 minutes left, whatever it was at this point. I think about 7 minutes. The Rangers score on the power play for what felt like the first time since about Halloween, maybe even earlier. But then, up 4-3, you get this just god-awful play by Keandre Miller. I will never know what he was thinking on this play. And as I've talked about in some recent episodes, I just cannot come up with any logical explanation for the way that Keandre Miller has regressed. 2 years into his career, sign that man up for 10 years, make him a long-term member of this Ranger team. It's going to be him and Adam Fox holding it down for a decade plus. And now I'm just left shaking my head, scratching my head, and just completely oblivious to how we got here, to how it's gotten this bad with Keandre Miller. And again, I don't want to pin the whole thing on him, but this play was so bad that it deserves a deep dive, and that's what we're going to do. So again, 4-3 Rangers at this point, down to less than 3 minutes to go. Puck is in the Ranger zone, by itself. The Stars are changing, so there's no pressure from Dallas whatsoever. Miller and Lindgren are both in the defensive zone. Miller tells Lindgren he's got it. You see him put his hand up. He's going to go get the puck. That's what he does. It's along the boards. He picks it up, and then he turns to his left and heads in the direction of the front of the Ranger net, which is already a little bit unusual. I mean, there was so much open space that Miller could have picked this puck up and immediately just gone up the boards there, skated the puck out of the zone himself. I thought, once I saw him turn, I figured he was going to head behind the net. And, you see defensemen do that. They basically park behind the net for a minute. Not like a literal minute, but you know what I mean. They go back there and they kind of survey the situation. Maybe there's an instance where the Rangers themselves are changing lines, and maybe he's going to hold the puck back there while the Rangers do so. And the fact that, we are getting late in this game, and there's not a lot of time left. There's less than 3 minutes at this point, and the Rangers have a 1-goal lead. The clock is your friend. So by doing this, if you're Miller, you can bleed some time off the clock there, which is obviously to your advantage if you're the Rangers. But instead, he goes in front of the net and goes to the other side of the ice, basically just straight across the ice in front of the net, goes to just in front of the corner there. And all of a sudden now he's in a kind of a rough spot because he's got Sam Steele bearing down on him. And Miller, for one reason or another, when he skated over there, he put himself in a position where he really could only play the puck on his backhand, like, because he's lefty and he's over there in the corner, and he's got no way of turning to get the puck to his forehand. And all of a sudden, again, there's a forechecker Steele bearing down on him. So Miller, I mean, at this point, like, it's not good what he's done, but he can still get out of this very easily. He's got a forward, I think it might have been Trocheck, who was wide open. He can send a backhand pass up toward the Ranger blue line. Trocheck's all by himself there. Trocheck, I'm sure, could handle it and get the puck moving in the opposite direction. He also, Miller, could throw the puck forehand around behind the boards, around the corner. Lindgren's on the other side. And again, there's no other stars even in the picture at this point. So that would have been a relatively safe play as well. So even though Miller, again, took this weird route, after he had the puck and went to kind of a strange spot on the ice for no apparent reason, he's still got options. He's still got things he can do. It's 1-on-4. There's one star in the Ranger zone. There are 4 Rangers, not counting Quick. But if you want to count Quick, I mean, technically there's 5 Rangers in the Ranger defensive zone. But Miller instead, he kind of panics and he tries to move the puck back to his forehand and then send a pass. I think this is what he was trying to do. Send a pass across the ice to Ryan Lindgren. But instead, whatever Miller was doing here, it got deflected by Steele. The puck kind of bounces into the air. It goes into the corner and Steele picks it up. Now, Steele goes back behind the net. He's going to the other corner. Miller's following him. Miller eventually, catches up to him and is able to, put him into the boards, but Steele basically just bounces off of him and, maintains control of the puck, makes a pass, and the goal is scored. And just like that, it's tied. Just an absolutely brutal miscue by K'Andre Miller. Just an awful goal for the Rangers to concede here. This game was within their grasp, and you can talk about some of the things that the Rangers did wrong in this game. And we'll get to those other things too, because we're not going to give other people a pass just because I'm kind of going all in on Miller right now. But the bottom line, they were in position to win this game. One way or another, they had a 1-goal lead. Every game, every point is so big for the Rangers right now. And granted, they did get a point in the overtime loss, but I mean, that's a very, very small consolation prize when you look at everything that happened in this game. But the thing that bothers me the most is just Miller was just so casual on this play, just so out to lunch, no sense of urgency. And then, again, he's got 1 star in the offensive zone, and that's enough to cause him to panic, turn the puck over. He can't put Steele into the boards with enough, enough oomph to knock him off the puck. Steele basically, again, just shrugged it off, made the pass he had to make, and, set up his teammate for the game-tying goal there. Meanwhile, Zach Jones, a healthy scratch for the 6th game in a row, mind you, is, I can only assume, in the MSG skybox, basically just smashing his head against a wall, having to watch this for, the 6th consecutive game, having to watch as a spectator for the 6th consecutive game. Can you imagine if Zach Jones did this? Not only would he have been benched for the rest of the game, and I realized there wasn't a lot of time left in this game, but Jones could have done this in the first period. At any point in the game, if Zach Jones does this, he's getting benched, and before the game would end, you would have Chris Drury trying to figure out a way to send Jones to the ECHL. That's probably what would have happened if Zach Jones committed a mistake like this in this instance. There's just so many Ranger defensemen that, I mean, it's just one blunder after the next. It's an epidemic, and it's not even just the defensemen. It's a lot of players. This season, more than any other, is a season where there have just been so many glaring, just jaw-dropping, unbelievable mistakes that the Rangers have made in the defensive zone that results in a turnover and either results in a goal for the opposition or a grade A scoring chance for the opposition, wherein either Igor or Quick bails out the Rangers. It just happened so many times this year. There's just no excuse for it. Even when the Rangers were rebuilding and they had that ridiculously young team, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, however far you want to go back, there weren't this many mistakes like this. There weren't this many god-awful, egregious turnovers in the defensive zone. There weren't this many mental lapses. There weren't this many nights where the Rangers didn't play with effort. And I don't think this was a game where the Rangers were lacking in effort, just to be clear about that. They just lost, and they lost again largely because of this just atrocious mistake that we saw here. And then you get Peter Laviolette after the game because he was asked about, why did you go right back to K'Andre Miller after that? Because Miller, in very short order, was right back on the ice. More on that in a second. But this is what Laviolette had to say regarding his decision to go back to Miller, talking about the goal there. This is an actual quote. Listen to this. There's things that go wrong on every goal, and so there was definitely things that we could have done better inside of that goal as well. there's a couple of breakdowns on that particular instance. Holy word salad. Like, was that AI generated? What does that even mean? Look, I get that Laviolette, like a lot of coaches in this league, they don't want to just bury their own guys. They don't want to throw them under the bus or anything like that. But Laviolette's starting to lose me a little bit with some of these quotes, with some of these like lineup decisions, and deciding who gets the most ice time and who gets the least amount of ice time. Now, I will say that contrary to what a lot of people say, I do think Laviolette has tried some different things throughout this almost season-long funk that the Rangers find themselves in. But some of these personnel decisions have just been wild. And again, to the point that I was making just a second ago, Miller did not miss a shift. This goal that the Stars tied to tie it at the end of regulation here, the goal that they scored at the end of regulation here to tie the game, this occurred with exactly 2 minutes and 39 seconds to go. So they go, obviously the face-off at center ice. I believe it was Fox and Lindgren who were out there after that. But you get an offside call on the Stars just 23 seconds later, 2:16 left in the game at this point. And then they go to a commercial break. So coming out of the commercial break, I mean, that's a couple of minutes, and everybody on the Rangers, defensemen, forwards, whatever, they all have a chance to catch their breath. Everybody should be like ready to go for the following shift coming out of a commercial break here. So you can pretty much go with anybody that you want if you're Peter Laviolette. Who does he put back out there after the commercial break? Well, that would be K'Andre Miller and Will Borgen. Borgen was fine in this game. I think he's starting to settle in as a Ranger and playing pretty good hockey. He's playing with some physicality, which is nice to see. But my God, you've got the entire team at your disposal. You go back to K'Andre Miller after that mistake in a season chock full of them. You guys try to explain that to me, because I can't do it. I can't do it. Usually I try to find like some reason where, okay, maybe this is what he was thinking. Maybe that's what he was thinking. When we see Mika, and he's played a little bit better recently too, which is nice to see, including this game. But when Mika was going through all of his issues and all of his struggles, we would see him on the ice at the end of the game. At least there I could say something like, well, the Rangers are down by a goal here. Maybe he's trying to get Mika like a big moment to get him going a little bit. There's no upside to putting K'Andre Miller back on the ice here. And when you're going to hold certain guys accountable, K'Andre Miller has to be held accountable too, and he wasn't. So he was back out there. He was out there again at the very end of regulation from like a minute left to about 15 seconds left. And then the Stars took an icing at the end of regulation. He's out there in overtime on the second shift at the penalty kill. Now, that one I'll defend a little bit because, you're in overtime. There's a PK going on. You've got certain defensemen that you're going to look to. And when you've only got 3 skaters on the ice in the first place and you have to kill off a power play by the opposing team, certainly you're going to go with 2 defensemen, which is what the Rangers did. But again, the fall from grace for Miller has just been inexplicable, unbelievable. And this miscue here obviously cost the Rangers dearly. So we will keep everything going in just a second. I want to talk about some of the other things that the Rangers did wrong in this game, and we will get right to that. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert, this past summer. Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins at Citi Field. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite live events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you do not have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is Gametime. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers. As always, the Rangers going to be back in action Thursday night at 7 p.m. at home against the New Jersey Devils. Whatever happens in that game, we'll be back to discuss it either later that night or sometime, Friday morning, whatever it might be. But for right now, let's keep the focus on this game because, like I said, I don't want to pin everything on Miller. It's just that was such an egregious mistake at such a big point in the game. But to be fair here, we're going to call out some other Rangers for some things that happened in this game. This section is called Everything Else That Sucked. And that's basically what it's going to be. We're just going to bounce around from one thing to the next that happened in this hockey game that just should not have happened and basically all added up to a loss for the New York Rangers. So let's go ahead and start with the opening shift of the second period. To me, this shift, and granted, the Rangers didn't end up giving up a goal here. They easily could have, though. This shift is like everything wrong with this team this season. Less than 15 seconds into the second period, the Stars just go right into the Rangers zone. There's no resistance. There's nobody even trying to slow them down. These are, they're talented players that are on the ice. These guys are obviously dangerous. You've got Fox and Lindgren. They're both like theoretically in position here. But the problem, and it's something that's been a problem with the Ranger defensemen all season, they give so much ground. This is one of the reasons why they struggle as badly as they do against the rush. This is why they struggle to defend the rush so badly, because they don't defend it. All they do is back skate. You've got Fox and Lindgren giving so much ground here, moving back. Robertson, who's obviously dangerous, he waltzes right in, goes right over the blue line, directly up the center of the ice, straight to the net, fires a shot. It goes off the post, does not go in. A little bit of puck luck there for the Rangers, thank God. But again, this has been a serious issue for the Rangers when it comes to defending the rush. The one thing that they've gotten away from, and thankfully so, is the thing where, there will be one defenseman back on a 2-on-1 rush, and whichever Ranger defenseman it is will just go down on the ice to their stomach and just slide across the ice and basically take themselves out of the play. We haven't seen as much of that recently, which is obviously nice, but they've done a lot of, they've had all kinds of problems defending the rush. I mean, I think that's no secret at this point, and certainly this was an example of that. There's just too much ground being given up. I realize that if you're a defenseman, you can't always try to go for an open ice hit right at the blue line and take yourself out of the play, and then that doesn't do anything to help your team either. But there's got to be some kind of a middle ground here. The Ranger defensemen are way, way too passive when it comes to defending a rush. All they do is skate backward, and before you know it, I mean, there's a pass, and there's a shot, and there's a great scoring chance for the opposition. One of these days, one of the Ranger defensemen is going to be doing this in this situation, giving all this ground while the team is coming over the blue line on the rush, and they're just going to keep back skating until they crash into the boards behind the net. I swear to God that's going to happen before this season is over. I don't understand why they do it like this. I mean, is this coaching? I know Phil Housley has been coming under fire from certain Ranger fans, and I don't think that's unfair at this point. He's obviously, a former defenseman himself, and it's his job to get these guys ready to go. And I just don't know what's happening. A lot of Ranger defensemen have regressed. I mean, granted, you could say basically just about every player on this Ranger team has regressed this season. But yeah, I mean, again, this sequence here was just awful because the Rangers didn't defend the rush. They didn't do anything to slow the guy down. And on top of that, it's another terrible start to a period, which has been a theme this season as well. Something else that we got to talk about here. This sequence drove a lot of people crazy. I know that. Will Borgen loses his stick, and none of the Ranger forwards give him their stick. Now, it's one thing if a Ranger defenseman or any defenseman loses his stick and then the opposition scores 4 or 5 seconds later. Maybe the forwards don't realize it. Maybe there's, maybe the defenseman was calling for the stick and they just couldn't make it happen quickly enough. This went on. Are you sitting down? This went on for 41 seconds. Borgen lost his stick. He was able to defend the play anyway. He actually shoved one of his guys down to the ice, but he's standing there and there's really not much you can do. I mean, as a defenseman or really any player, if you don't have your stick, but it is far more important. You're pinned in your own zone here, long offensive zone possession for the opposition. And it's far more important for the defenseman to have his stick rather than a forward. And again, if a goal gets scored quickly, fine. I understand it can't happen instantaneously. The Ranger forwards and the three that were on the ice here, Edstrom, Chytil, and Berard, they all had 41 seconds to give their stick to Will Borgen. Now, eventually, finally, Filip Chytil either saw what was happening or saw an opening to give away his stick. He did give his stick to Borgen, which is kind of interesting because you've got a lefty giving his stick to a righty. But by that time, it was too late. The Stars scored 2 seconds later. If this happens a little bit earlier, maybe within the first 30 seconds of Borgen not having his stick, maybe this goal doesn't get scored. And this was the game-tying goal for the Stars, the first game-tying goal for the Stars, tied the score at 3-3. So, yeah, the two goals that the Stars scored in this game that tied the game were both just infuriating for different reasons. But again, mental mistake here by the Rangers. There's got to be more communication. I mean, Borgen, I don't know, was he calling for the stick, from one of the forwards? He should be. Again, it's more important for the defenseman to have his stick. Where the forwards, I mean, they had to have noticed by that point. There's a stick down on the ice. A lot of passing going on at some point or another. You've got to notice this, you would think. But they didn't, or if they did notice it, They didn't act on it, and you see the result. The Stars tie the game at 3. One other thing here is that we got to talk about the Panarin hooking penalty in overtime. This was really bad too. And it wasn't even so much the penalty itself. It was everything that happened to result in Panarin having to take this penalty. It's the position that Artemi Panarin put himself in to really have no choice other than to hook his opponent. Because, the overtime starts, and I like the fact that the Rangers went with Trocheck and Panarin and Fox. To me, we haven't seen many overtime games this season. That was only the second one, and the Rangers have now lost both of them. But to me, those are the only 3 players that should ever start an overtime period for the Rangers. Panarin, because of obviously the tremendous skill and the extra open ice that he can use to, take advantage of said skill. You've got Trocheck, who is skilled in his own right, but the big thing there is he's an excellent faceoff guy, and you've got a good chance of winning that very important faceoff that starts overtime. The Stars won this faceoff, and it led directly to them getting a power play and scoring the game-winning goal. So that'll give you an idea of just how important that first faceoff of overtime can be. So you want Trocheck out there, and you want Fox out there. I mean, you need a defenseman, and really, I don't think there's anybody else that even really has a claim to being out there over Fox in a situation like this. So they went with the right 3 guys. But the Stars win the faceoff, and you've got the Stars going over the blue line. Now, Panarin did make a good defensive play here. Duchesne had the puck, and he was able to knock it away from him. But the Stars get it back, and you've got Heiskanen going in up the left side. Johnston makes a beeline straight for the net. Panarin is there. He's in position. He's got, inside positioning on Johnston. But he doesn't sense Johnston going to the net or doesn't, react to it quickly enough. I don't know what was happening here. Johnston basically just goes right by Panarin. Panarin tried to catch back up. By this point, again, it's too late. He read the play too late. He reacted too late, whatever it was, and he's got to hook him, and he takes the penalty. And now the Stars are going on the power play, and of course, that ends up leading to the game-winning goal at the tail end of the power play. And, you have a game here where the Rangers should have gotten 2 points. They only got 1. So there were more things other than that, but those are the ones that I just really had to kind of expand upon here and just break down in great detail because, it's just all this stuff adds up, man. And it's not championship hockey, to say the very least. It's not even the kind of hockey of a team that is going to make the playoffs, because right now the Rangers are on the outside looking in. That's something else. I did a quick standings check right before this. The Rangers, for all their struggles and all their miserable hockey games that they've played from like the middle of November until now, basically a stretch that's gone on for about 2 months, they are only 4 points out of the last playoff spot, if you can possibly believe that. There's a lot of teams right in that area that are kind of bunched together in the standings, but the fact remains the same. They're 4 points out. All these points are big, and yeah, they got the 1, but if they miss the playoffs by 1 point, I think a lot of us are going to look back to this game, because this is a game where, again, they had a 3-goal lead. They had a 1-goal lead very late in regulation, and they just shot themselves in the foot with all these mistakes, all this lackadaisical play, all this just atrocious defense. Not good enough, and results in an overtime loss in a game where the Rangers never trailed, and they lose it anyway. So, yep. Just a second, I want to shift our attention to some injury news. We've got Chris Kreider landing on IR, and Filip Chytil was also injured in this game as well, which I know has a lot of us holding our collective breaths. We're going to talk about that, how it impacts the Rangers in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Want to close out today's episode by talking about some of the injury news here, namely Chris Kreider hitting the IR. We found out about that before the game. He had missed the game prior as well, but had not been placed on IR to that point. It's funny, our last episode that we did where we talked about the pickup of Arthur Kaliyev, was recorded right before news of that broke, so I didn't get a chance to talk about this in the last episode. But the move of putting Kreider on IR is retroactive to Sunday. You can do that, based on the last time that they played in a game, whichever player that it might be. It's unfortunate to lose Kreider, even in a season where he's obviously not been himself and obviously a subpar season. I think certainly that's more than fair to say at this point, especially considering the fact that we're like right at the halfway point here. But if there is a silver lining here, if you want to be the ultimate optimist, which we do our best to do on this podcast, again, the Rangers have made it challenging this season for sure. But if there is a silver lining, it's that maybe all of this rest does Kreider a little bit of good. Maybe, and it's a back injury, so they're tricky. I'm certainly no doctor, but I do know that they can linger a little bit. And hopefully, again, going back to kind of being like glass half full here and finding the silver lining, maybe the back injury is at least partly to blame for Chris Kreider's struggles this season, at least partly. I don't know if he can go all the way with it, but there's times out there where it looks like he either can barely move, possibly due to the back, or that he doesn't want to move for reasons. I can't really explain why, but I'm hoping that it's at least the former of those two things, that it is injury related, which would at least explain, again, the subpar numbers, the subpar, agility out there, just the subpar season in general for Chris Kreider. And maybe, I don't know how many games he's going to miss here. The Rangers might not know either, and even if they did, they wouldn't tell us. But maybe, he gets off his feet a little bit, he comes back refreshed, and he looks more like the Chris Kreider that we've watched play hockey for this team for about a decade and a half, somebody that can actually impact the game in a positive way. So we'll see what happens. But my hope, again, is that he comes back, refreshed from this whole thing and ready to go. That's assuming that the Rangers, don't look to trade him. I do believe, and I want to double check this before I hit record, I don't think that players can be traded when they're on IR. I'm not 100% about that. I'm going to check that and get back to you guys on that in the next episode, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, assuming that Chris Kreider is still here, the hope is obviously that he gets healthy and he can play, a better brand of hockey than what we've seen from him so far this season. As a result of all this, though, Mika Zibanejad is back on the top power play. Lafreniere is still there too, and then the three that are always there, Panarin, Trocheck, and Fox. So it was nice to see the Rangers break through on the power play. You had that shot from Mika deflected by Trocheck, and we thought that was going to be the game winner, but that just was not in the cards at the end of this night. And then Filip Chytil, he suffers an injury as well. He was not on the bench, the Ranger bench, at the start of the third period. And then midway through the third period, we had Sam Rosen announcing to all of us, the viewers, that Chytil had sustained an upper body injury and had been ruled out as far as, possibly returning to that game. And I'm not really sure when it happened or how it happened. I mean, I'm sure at some point somebody will post a video and, maybe this is when Chytil sustained the injury. But look, man, anytime this happens with Filip Chytil, we all hold our breath for very, very good reasons. We know the concussion history is well documented. Hopefully it's not a head injury. Again, the Rangers aren't really saying much. Peter Laviolette, after the game, all he said was it's upper body being evaluated. So a 5-word explanation, or 5.5 words, I guess, of what happened to Filip Chytil and what's going on moving forward here. And I understand, they're trying to protect the players' privacy as much as they can, and maybe even their safety. I know teams don't like to identify injuries other than upper body or lower body injury. But yeah, obviously the hope, I think, for all of us is that, this is not concussion related, nothing with the head or anything of the sort, but this is the second time this season where Chytil is going to miss time due to injury. And I saw somebody make this point on social media, and it's certainly true. The Rangers over the last handful of seasons have been very lucky, I guess you could say, when it comes to injuries. There have not been a bunch of significant injuries to these players. And even when players do get injured, it feels like they get back in there sooner rather than later. Man, they've been more prevalent this year. I'm not going to sit here and blame the Rangers' problems for the injuries. That doesn't help. Obviously, they've got bigger problems than just that. But it does feel like there have been more injuries for these players this season on the Rangers than what we've seen in recent years. And it kind of puts that in perspective and makes you realize just how fortunate we've all been as Ranger fans, not seeing a ton of injuries in recent seasons. But, again, a whole nothing update from Peter Laviolette. he doesn't have to tell us anything, and clearly he didn't. You'll also be stunned to know that there hasn't been a significant update on Filip Chytil's status today either. However, we do have new line combinations from practice a little bit earlier today, Wednesday, for frame of reference. This is what we've got as far as the forwards are concerned, and the defensemen are all the same. Zach Jones isn't getting back in there, so don't look for it. But for the forwards, top line's the same: Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere. One of their best games of the season in this one. They combine. I mean, that's another thing that just drives you crazy about a game like this. We have a game where this line basically resurrects itself. These guys are basically back from the dead. Lafreniere and Trocheck combine for 2 goals. Trocheck also had an assist. Panarin had 3 assists. That sounds like a stat line for this line back from 2023, 2024, way back in the day, right? But no, that actually happened this season. Those guys were on fire and had a heck of a game. But unfortunately, again, the Rangers make too many mistakes and they end up losing. So that doesn't get to be the focal point of our Ranger discussion today, which again, very unfortunate because, for the first half of this game and really, right up until the Stars tied it and ultimately won it, this was one of the best games of the season for that line. So certainly you're not going to break those 3 up coming off of a game like that. In the second line, you've got Will Cooley into the top 6 with Mika Zibanejad and Riley Smith. At first glance, I feel like this could work. You've got Smith, who brings some speed. You've got Mika, who, again, is starting to snap out of it at least a little bit. I think overall his game has been better. He's been contributing more offensively as well. Just seems more awake and alert. I saw him finish a check in this game, put his guy into the boards with a pretty good amount of oomph on it. And you heard the Ranger crowd, react audibly to it. Maybe out of surprise, because we're not used to seeing Mika, really finish his checks the way that, he could. But he did it there and got a nice reaction for it. And then you've got Will Cooley there. And Cooley, again, through his work ethic, he's kind of a bull in a china shop kind of a player. And he'll go in there on the forecheck. He'll fight for the pucks. He'll do some of the dirty work. He's got some skill as well. And I think he'll keep Mika honest, or hopefully that's the case. I think this could work. Again, you got Mika figuring it out. Smith can bring the speed element. He's been playing a little bit better recently, and Cooley can do the dirty work and bring some skill as well. So it sounds like that'll be the second line for the Devils, and I'm all for it. Then the third line, left to right, you've got Kaliyev, Brodzinski, and Berard. So new look third line, to say the least. I can't imagine that Kaliyev will not make his debut against the Devils. That is helped along by the fact that, obviously Kreider is not available, and obviously, Filip Chytil doesn't look, not to say for sure, but, the injury seems like his status is questionable at best. So looks like Kaliyev will probably be making his Ranger debut there. And then the fourth line, you've got Edstrom, Carrick, and Vesey with Rempe rotating in. Rempe's suspension is over. They called him up right before this most recent game. So that was the 8th and final game of his suspension. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rempe in the lineup. Again, there's forwards that are probably going to be missing. Kreider is definitely going to be missing. Probably Chytil. That opens up some spots. And given the fact that this is against the Devils and they've played some nasty games, the Rangers didn't have Rempe available against the Devils in the last game, and that game got a little bit nasty. So I think there's a pretty good chance Rempe's going to be in the lineup, but we shall see. One more thing that I wanted to talk about before we call it here. I wanted to end the show on a positive, and that was the fact that this was Hockey Fights Cancer Night. And the Rangers did a great job with this. All the teams do a great job with this. But a lot was going on this night, as far as, honoring those that are, battling cancer. John Giannone, he mentioned this during one of the intermissions. He was there with Henrik Lundqvist. He was diagnosed 1 month ago with prostate cancer. To my knowledge, he had not revealed this, at least not publicly up until this moment. But he seems to be in good spirits. He was talking about it, and that was great and everything to hear that, he's doing good with it. But he mentioned other prostate cancer survivors in the MSG family, guys like Dave Maloney. He also mentioned the studio director, John Gallagher. You had a beautiful national anthem before this game, and a lot of the cancer survivors in the building were on the ice for that. So it was great to honor all of them. You had a 10-year-old by the name of Caden Callaghy. I believe I'm saying that right. He got to ring the bell in the MSG crowd, which, obviously signifies that he's now cancer-free. This kid had apparently been battling cancer for 5 years. He's 10 years old, battling cancer for half of his life. That just rips your heart out to even hear that. But by that same token, awesome to hear that he's now cancer-free. Obviously, the kid's a battler. And then, you had the ceremony, or whatever you want to call it, where everybody holds up a sign that says, "I fight for," and then you write in the name of somebody who family member, friend, whatever it might be, that's has battled cancer, is battling cancer. So that's obviously a nice moment of solitude, whether it's at the Ranger game or any other sporting event, really. Brian Boyle, a cancer survivor himself, he dealt with it while he was still playing, came back, played a few more seasons. He was presenting custom jerseys to other cancer survivors in the stands, personalized jerseys with that person's, last name on the back of them. So that was really cool to see as well. And Sam and Joe mentioned it, Joe Micheletti's family's been through it a couple of times as well. So, one of those things, it really does affect everybody. Either, you've had it or maybe a family member or a friend, everybody at least knows somebody at this point. And, it's great that the Rangers do and the NHL does everything that they can to help those and honor those. And, just a great night. It's obviously a difficult battle for anybody that's going through it or has been through it. But, the Rangers do everything they can to give those people a very special night. And I think they delivered on that in this game. Would have been great to get a win too, but, it just wasn't in the cards, I suppose. So anyway, we'll call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.